Hey family, welcome to Sergeant Dorsey Speaks live at 5 p.m. on Thursday. I see a little swirling, so I'm not sure um, if it's actually broadcasting or if it's just buffering. I don't know. But I'm here. I hope you're here. And as you guys step into the room, I'll see you. When you come into the room right away, share this on your timeline. That's what I'm doing. Create a watch party so that your other friends on Facebook will have an opportunity to see and hear what we're talking about today. I'm going to be updating and just talking a little bit about the memorial service for those of you who didn't see it today for George Floyd. Wasn't a memorial, actually, it was his funeral today in Minneapolis. There are going to be, I think, two or three other memorials. I know that there was one simultaneously being held in New York by his brother. I believe it was in Brooklyn, New York. And then on Tuesday or Monday of next week, they're going to transport the body to Houston, his hometown, is how it's referred. And there will be a funeral there as well. And then one more, a private uh, going home service on Tuesday. So um, that's what went on. You can hear me, Larry? Great. You know, one of the things that I learned is that I need to make sure I toggle my volume as high as I can on my laptop when I'm talking to you, because when I'm listening and I'm on Skype and I'm on Zoom, I tend to turn the volume down because I have my earbuds in and, it's really, really loud. But I'm glad that you guys can hear me. Hey, Marie, my day, girl, it was crazy, crazy. But listen, right now, crazy and busy is good. I have been blessed to have gotten the attention of some folks all over the world. And so I've shared with you before, and I will say it again. I am happy that I have been able to talk to audiences in South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. They want to hear from Frankie and Zango's baby about what's going on here in the United States. And so I'm happy to be able to share with them truthfully, candidly, honestly about what we need to do to make things better. And so to that end, I got a lot to talk about. I did a little hit earlier about um, the 2:30, 3 o'clock range. Then they held me on air a little after 3 p.m. on KNBC, Channel 4 here locally. And they were talking a little bit about the protesters and things that are going on. And also, I guess, you guys, Mayor Garcetti, he's promising to do all kind of amazing things. And he's come out with some list of gibberish. I'll decipher it for you. That's going to make all the difference in the world, family. If he would have just decided to do these things, who knows, in 90, well, he wasn't there in 92, but in the not so distant past, police would have stopped killing folks. So one of the things he's talking about doing is, and I got notes all, I'm surrounded by little notes all around me. But one of the things that the LA Mayor, Eric Garcetti, is talking about doing is kind of defunding the police department. He's going to take away some millions or billions of dollars from the police, and that's going to make everything oh so much better as soon as he takes money out of their wallet. Because listen, if he takes money from the police budget, surely officers will no longer use deadly force as a first resort, right? So, yeah, that's one of the things that he said he's going to do. And hey, Lawrence. Hey, Sandra. Carol, what's up? The other thing that the mayor said, which is it's laughable, and this lets you know that he's full of, it. Can I just say that he's full of it? Because the community can get all excited. Of course, the young people, the millennials are, because he's gonna defund the police department, and they think the police department shouldn't exist anyway. And so some of these young folks think that, taking away however much money he's going to take away isn't enough. He needs to take away more and ultimately completely defund police departments. That's not going to happen. But one of the things that, I find troubling about all of what Mayor Garcetti is doing is that for the LA family, let me just talk to you guys for a minute, because, a couple of days ago, your police chief, Mike Moore, guess he, said something out loud that he normally just says around the house. I don't know Mike's heart. I really don't. I did work for Mike. He was my lieutenant for a time. We were on the job at the same time. We grew up on it together. He had a few years. I would think Michael Moore has had less years. Had I don't know if he had less time on the job than I did. I can't imagine because, well, I'll tell you a secret. If I had stayed on the Los Angeles Police Department, now you guys don't be start trying to do the math and figure out how young I am. But in a couple of months, I will have 40 years. If I had stayed on the Los Angeles Police Department, I would have 40 years on the job. That is stupid. And so I said all that to say, so if Mike Moore has more time on than I do, then that means he's got 40 plus years on LAPD. That's just bananas. Why would you stay on any job that long? Because the longer you stay, statistics show the less you have on the other end. And so I am just wired for sound, family, because in a couple of months, August 2020, I will, for real, be off what they call probation, right? I will have gotten all of my contributions back from the city of Los Angeles. I have been hitting them up every month consistently for an entire, count them, 20 years. That's how long I've been retired. So for all you naysayers and shit starters who want to know, why did she say something sooner, why did you wait till you retired? Because I've been retired for a long time, sir, ma'am. uh that's why. And when I retired in 2000, this wasn't going on to the extent that it is globally, nationally, locally, and certainly we weren't seeing the kinds of recordings that we're seeing right now. So having said all that, back to Eric Garcetti. So Eric Garcetti, said he's all good with Mike Moore because the other day Mike Moore stubbed his toe and he said something equating the protesters to the four officers who killed George Floyd. He said that George Floyd's death, and I'm not, it's not an exact quote, but something to the effect of George Floyd's death by those four officers is also on the his blood is on the hands of the protesters, or the protesters are equally as culpable in his death. And of course, Eric Garcetti gave him the fucking heave ho. What the what? And so Mike Moore had to apologize. He had to, get right and get in line and say that's, I shouldn't have said it. It was offensive. No shit, Sherlock. You shouldn't have said that, but you did. And so listen, I can't speak to his heart, but sometimes every now and again, there's a little Freudian slip, right? And sometimes every now and again, they'll say something out loud that they really only meant to say in those quiet, dark, hushed corners where they gather, or maybe at the river. You know what I'm talking about. And so I was asked by KMBC and a couple of other news networks, should Mike Moore resign? Well, here's what I have to say about that since you asked. If a police officer, a ground pounder like me, and some of you who are watching, said something that kind of indicated you have some kind of angst or animus toward a particular group of folks, that you feel some kind of way about them, how can you effectively oversee them, manage, supervise police officers if you feel like Mike Moore said he felt? He's a grown man. He's fully developed, I believe. And so nobody made him say that stuff. He said what he said. And so they asked Eric Garcetti, well, how do you feel about that? And the mayor said, well, I know he didn't mean to say it. He said it, sir. So he meant to say it. He's not a damn dummy with somebody's hand up his ass, I don't think. He's not there's no ventriloquist sitting next to him, moving his lips and saying something. So he said it, he meant to. But Eric Garcetti said, hey, listen, he apologized. So that's all you got to do is apologize. But listen, if he didn't know, he shouldn't have said that. I'm going to say to him what they say to us. If you didn't know, you should have known. And if a police officer had that kind of feeling, a police officer is ineffective and you can't do your job, and they probably banish you to the cornfield like little Johnny did on the Outer Limits or Twilight Zone. Yeah, Twilight Zone. And so maybe, Mike Moore needs to find a new church home. And listen, for the LA family who don't know, you understand Mike Moore was not the first pick for police chief. He tried this before and they were like, dude, bye. And so he went and started applying here, there, and everywhere, and he didn't get picked up. And then when Charlie decided he wanted to hit the eject button 2 years before his contract ended, and listen, if any of you have been able to figure out why Charlie Beck left, Hit me up in my instant messenger box, right? I want to know because you don't leave those kinds of positions just because you get tired. He fought hard for a second term and then he didn't complete it. I want to know why. So Mike Moore got word that Charlie was going to hit the eject button, and lo and behold, he comes sliding back over to LA with his little application. Can I be your police chief? And I guess maybe they figured they had him in the cornfields long enough, and so they gave him the nod. And everything that he's done and said since he's been police chief has been intellectually dishonest. You guys saw him on TV clutching his pearls and acting like he didn't know Metro Division officers engage in pretext stops. Really, Mike? You didn't know? He act like he didn't know that his officers were putting folks in the cow gang system just because they could. So that's one of the other things that Eric Garcetti is going to stop. Oh, well, that's good because you ruin these young people's lives going forward when you give them a title or when you arrest them on some BS. So that's helpful, Eric. But listen, dude, I need to talk to you about your police chief. What you gonna do about Mike Moore? Because unless you are willing to give him the heave ho, back to the cornfields you go, Michael Moore, then I can't trust anything you say, Eric Garcetti. And so all that other stuff is just fluff, and it sounds good and sexy when you talk about defunding because that's what the young people want to hear. But I think you're disingenuous, sir. That's just me. I'm just saying. Um, so that's going on. And let's see, what else? What else? What else? Um, Yeah, okay. So that's going on with LAPD, LA City. And I was talking to a friend of mine today because, we were talking a little bit about the whole homegoing service for um, Mr. Floyd. And it made me think about something. And for some of my LAPD family, you'll remember this story because I'm thinking about his children right now, Mr. Floyd. He has a daughter who I think is about 6, and I think, at least 2 young millennial looking sons. And I also heard at the end of this news segment that I did with Spectrum Cable today that there is a GoFundMe that somebody set up. And this GoFundMe has raised over $12 million so far. And listen, the family hasn't even hit that Minneapolis lottery because they about to hit it. They about to take that ticket, cash it in, and then they're going to have even more on top of whatever this GoFundMe ultimately does. It's at 12 million right now. So I said all that to say this, children trump siblings. Mr. Floyd wasn't married, and so this money should go, hopefully will go to his 3 children. Now, that brings me to thinking about the children of an LAPD officer who died suddenly, very young, C.R.A.S.H. You guys remember her? She was working DARE back in the day when DARE was a thing, DARE division. And C.R.A.S.H. had a brain aneurysm and died. And she had 2 young sons. I want to say like maybe 19 and 21 or 18 and 20, something like that. They were very young. And they came into a little bit of coin because of their mom passing. And I also remember because I met her, the baby's father, the children's father. I met him one day. He used to own the liquor bank. Many of you remember the liquor bank that was on the corner of Crenshaw and Stocker. Well, the man who owned that, at least that's what he told me, was the father of Cherie Arant's grown sons. And also, what happened is that when these young men came into this money from their mother passing suddenly, sadly, tragically, there was an attorney in Compton, Deborah, maybe something like that. You guys know the story. There was an attorney in Compton who somehow was involved with these young men and pretending to represent them, had befriended these young boys. And the long and the short of it was is that, she had been stealing from these kids. She had been um, not looking out for them in a way that you would expect her to do. And it was a sister girl. And what happened is that somehow somebody went to the home where these boys lived and shot and killed them both, killed them both. And I just remember thinking how sad and tragic that was, that there was nobody to look out for these young men having come into whatever amount of money it was that they came into when their mom passed away. Because listen, young people, easy come, easy go. And I'm just saying that I hope these young men who are going to be beneficiaries, if you will, of large amounts of money are about to get a whole lot of friends. And I hope that they have a great support system and families surrounding them and looking out for them so that they don't become victimized, so that no one takes advantage of them. And so, I started subject hopping as I was talking with my LAPD friend who shall remain nameless. And we were talking about not only, wishing the best for these young people, but also just about the kind of officer that Derek Chauvin probably is. And we were kind of joking, at least me, because I'm silly like that, that I imagine him being the kind of guy who nobody wanted to work with. When you get to work and you walk in the watch commander's office and you look up on the board and you see today you working with knucklehead. And you go to the watch commander, you're like, watch commander, lieutenant, sarge, please, why you got to put me with this guy? He just seems like the kind of guy that nobody would want to work with because probably everybody understood who he was. I bet you he had a reputation around the station house. Folks knew that he could probably get you in some trouble if you wind up partnering with him, and nobody wanted to work with them. And I said in the very beginning that I thought these three young officers probably had less time on the job than him. We know that to be true now. I read somewhere one started 2008, another 2017, and then 2019. And I imagine they were probably a little intimidated by this jackass, Derek Chauvin. And so, nobody wants to say anything to him. And listen, if you've been on a police department, LAPD, I'm talking to some of you right now. We all know somebody, we work with somebody on the LAPD who, when you walked in the watch commander's office and you saw their name on the board, you were just, really? Ooh, it's going to be a long 8 hours and 45 minutes. And so then that brought us to talking about one of my old training officers. And so I'll just, say his name, Mike Blackburn, P3 plus one, Southwest Division, worked over in the jungle. He was my TO. And you guys know Mike Blackburn was a piece of work. He was a piece of work. He was like nothing I had ever seen. He reminds me of Chauvin, the kind of guy that folks just, ugh, I had no choice. I was on probation. So when they made him my TO, I just had to grit my teeth, bite my tongue, and try to get through the 3 months that I was going to be working with him because he was the kind of guy who, during the course of the night, if he asked for code 7 lunch, he had to eat at a certain time. I think it was 7 p.m. every night, 7 p.m. He's got to have lunch. And if he couldn't have lunch at 7 p.m. because we had to get on the radio and ask the RTO, hey, is it quiet enough requesting code 7? We're asking, can we go off and eat? And if it's busy, the RTO might deny you code 7. And when she denied you lunch, then other units in the area would hear it and they'd say, oh, give me that radio call. I'll handle it. Let that unit eat. And that's how we kind of took care of one another, which is why you don't want to piss your partners off that work with you on the same shift. Because if you're trying to eat and you ask for code 7 and they say negative, handle these 3 calls, and one of the calls could be a rape, that means you're not going to eat tonight because you're going to be on radio calls right through the end of watch, right? Till the end of your shift. And so Mike Blackburn would lose his literal mind if he couldn't get code 7. And that was just one of his little quirky little weird little idiosyncrasies. The other thing that Mike Blackburn would do is when we started our shift, because I was the boot, so it was incumbent upon me, but he also helped. We had to wash our black and white at the start of the shift because I think he was like a germaphobe. I know I'm doing a lot right now. I talk about some of these encounters in my autobiography. I can't remember if I went into detail about Blackburn. That's why I'm sharing it with you now. But we had to wash our car at the start of shift. And I don't just mean the outside. I mean, this wackadoodle had me washing the inside of the car, the armrest, anything that he would touch. We had to wash that car completely. And it was funny because the other P3s, the other training officers knew he was a knucklehead. And they were like, what the hell? This guy's in the station 45 minutes after we get out of roll call when he should be out there handling calls in his area. Now, other people are in his area handling his calls because he's in the station washing the damn car for an hour. And so, Guys knew that, but nobody really said anything to him because they knew he was a wackadoodle, and a lot of people didn't want to tangle with him. A lot of other training officers just, that's Blackburn. Just let him be Blackburn. Did nobody want to deal with him? I think that's who Siobhan was. One more Blackburn story. Because he was this quirky little guy, and I don't know if he was military or not, but I mean, he was always sharp. He was always class A, which meant he was always in long sleeve. Very seldom would he wear a short sleeve shirt. He was always class A, long sleeve with a tie, no matter how hot it was. And we worked PM watch, which is the second shift. So he was always in a long sleeve shirt. And he always looked nice in his uniform. He had a really nice little physique for an older guy. Yeah. Okay, let me not say what I was about to say, but he looked nice in his class A, and he took pride in it. His shoes were always immaculate. And I remember one night we were working, and he popped a button on his uniform. And when I tell you, everything came to a halt, we had to stop what we were doing. He got on the radio and told communications something that wasn't true because he needed to go to the station and change his shirt. He had to go back to the station and change his uniform shirt because he couldn't be out there, when the button popped. Because I don't know, you can't police if you're missing a button. I don't know, but anyway, yeah, he was a wackadoodle, not waggle doodle, but wackadoodle. Hey, Ed. He was just a nut job. And every police department has them, every division has them. Okay, so one more C story. There was another guy that I worked with, which is why, I mean, I treated people, good, whether they were partners, except for the ones who didn't treat me good. And you guys heard me call his name yesterday in my little diatribe with Aisha, Douglas Iverson, Doug Shure, Stanley Schott. Yeah, didn't treat me well. Jackasses, all three of them. And so, yeah, I wasn't nice to people who weren't nice to me. But I worked with another officer when I was a sergeant over in Newton Division, and this was a white boy who from LA, I believe, or Nebraska, but he had an Australian an Australian accent. And so everybody knew he was the guy that at Newton Division nobody really wanted to deal with because something was wrong with him. He spoke like damn Crocodile Dundee. And we were like, what is wrong with this guy? And in addition to that, sometimes he would do things that would get him a personnel complaint. And me being the supervisor, not his directly, but being a supervisor, I had to deal with him one time, and they were going to suspend him for something that he had been accused of that was improper. And we had to go to his house, and I was always very, very nice to him because I knew he was odd. I knew he was a gun nut. And shortly before that had happened, there was a black man who had worked at Piper Tech. I'm not doing too much, family. I'm just giving you a little LAPD history. There was a black man who worked at Piper Tech. Piper Tech was where we used to take our police radios when something was wrong and we needed a IT person to work on it. And so there was a black guy who worked at Piper Tech. And somebody had pissed him off. He went postal back when going postal was a thing that people used to refer to. And he went on a killing spree. And it was really unusual because, we don't usually do that. But Brother Man went on a killing spree over in Piper Tech, and the way it was talked about is that when he came into the big building, very large facility, very many floors, many cubicles, a lot of technicians, a lot of geeky kind of folks in there, and a few cops who were coming in to have their vehicles serviced. And this guy went from cubicle to cubicle hunting people who had pissed him off, who he felt had done him wrong. This was way before Christopher Dorner, right? He was a civilian, and he would open up the door and look in a room, and he would see you, according to what the survivors said. And he said, you've been good to me, I'm going to let you live. And then he looked at the person who was seated at the desk next to him and shot that person and killed him. So having known that that happened, when I was working with old boy who spoke like an Australian person, I knew this is somebody I don't want to piss off. I'm gonna do my job, but I'm gonna be nice to him. So if he decides to come in here, because he was like damn Tackleberry from the Police Academy movie, right? He had all these guns. And so when he got in trouble and I had to go to his house and tell him that he was being suspended and relieved of duty and take his duty weapon, I was also told to take any other weapons that he had in the house. And I had to go with another sergeant because I wasn't going to go by myself for sure. And I think, can't remember who I took with me. I want to say Terry Barkley. I want to say Terry Barkley, but he was the AWC at Newton. So I don't know if Terry would have gone with me. Maybe it was Terry that I told I need somebody else to go with me. And when we went to this guy's house, he had guns everywhere. He had guns in the doggone drawer where you might have knives, spoons, and forks. He had guns under his pillow, under his mattress, under the rug, in every room, under the seat cushions and all the chairs. I mean, he was a mess. He was the guy you did not want to work with because he might do something that cost you your job, or he was the guy that you didn't want to piss off because if he got mad and he came into the division to shoot it up, you wanted him to look at you and say, "You were nice to me, I'll let you live." And so I had to take all 36 of his guns. I was nice when I did it, and I explained to him in great detail why. He understood. He had no issue with me. Thank you, Jesus. And I was able to get out of there and ultimately, because I'm here, retire all in one piece. And so you said, Jenkins, you said, when was this and why aren't these stories told? I'm telling you now, silly. Are you listening? Listen, buy my book, Black and Blue, The Creation of a Social Advocate. Yeah, there's stories in my book. I name names. That's what I do. And the reason that I name names, family, is because I want you to know that what I'm saying is true. I don't want you to think I'm pulling something out of my nether regions and I'm just making stuff up. So I don't have a problem telling you, who the culprit was. Now, in my autobiography, sometimes I use aliases because I like to give people little names rather than call them by their own. And sometimes they weren't nice names either. So when I revised my book, I had to take out some of the profanity because some of them were, profanity laced. Like this female lieutenant that I worked for, and I used to call her affectionately the speckleback bitch. There's a reason why she had speckles all over her back. Because I used to see her fat ass when she was in the locker room with me, and she thought she was cute, and I thought not so much. So I used to call her the speckleback bitch. But then when I revised my book and I wanted it to be something that could be readable by all, I just called her the speckleback witch. So you guys know I give people pseudonyms and aliases. But I talk about real life events and I talk about stories. And I shared that the other day with Aisha when I talked about Douglas Iverson. And I know some of you that are on here watching right now are friends with him on Facebook because I know he's here. I have no fucks to give. I talk about Douglas Iverson and his racist tendencies. Everybody knew on LAPD, much like the police chief in Minnesota knew Minneapolis, knew about Derek Chauvin. Eric Douglas Iverson had been the subject of many personnel complaints. He often targeted black tow truck drivers in 77th Division. I worked Central Traffic Division with Douglas Iverson. I was there for 5 years, and we handled Central Division, Newton Division, Hollenbeck Division, Northeast Division, and Rampart Division. Now, most of the black tow truck drivers would slide over into Newton Division from 77th because that was their hustle. They would hear a traffic accident call come out on the radio because back then everybody had scanners, and the tow truck drivers would show up because they wanted to tow the truck out of the intersection, tow the vehicle out of the intersection. And so, I didn't care who showed up. I just wanted the intersection cleared. I didn't care if it was OPG, official police garage tow, that was contracted with the city, or whether it was some dude from 77th Division who had a tow truck company and was trying to earn a living. I didn't care. Douglas Iverson did. And he messed with those tow truck drivers. And sometimes he would, get brothers who was driving a tow truck and didn't have a license, and Douglas would um, tow their trucks. So now they can't drive because, you can't make money if you don't have a tow truck. And so he would do that to mess with them. It was a legitimate tow. You can't drive if you don't have a license, and but I mean, really? Come on. But that was Douglas Iverson, and he continued to mess with these tow truck drivers. And then one day, there was a gentleman by the name of John Daniels, and I won't tell you the whole story by my book, but there was some history between Douglas Iverson and John Daniels, and ultimately, things went left. And as a result of that, um, Douglas Iverson was tried 3 different times. And the last time that he had been tried, because it was a hung jury, because really back then, I think this was 1997, folks really didn't want to find officers guilty of anything. They wanted to believe whatever they said about an encounter. And so I was contacted by the district attorney who was prosecuting Douglas Iverson at the time. Her name was, I think it was Kathleen Mader. Catherine, having a senior moment, but it was Mader, Mader, was the prosecutor. And so she contacted me and asked me if I would come and testify at the trial about who Douglas Iverson really was, what I knew about Douglas Iverson. Because, see, not only did Douglas Iverson mess with black tow truck drivers, Douglas Iverson messed with this little black girl. And so, because I'm not one to be messed with, I spoke up and I told the truth about who he was and what he did to me and what I know he did to others. And Derek Chauvin is probably that same guy, the same guy that you wouldn't want to work with because he's going to do something that's ultimately going to cost someone their life and maybe you your job. And now three other officers have been charged with aiding and abetting to murder, aiding and abetting to manslaughter, because they didn't have the intestinal fortitude to stand up and tell Derek Chauvin, no, that's enough, stop it, or to get up off of his body, because we couldn't see them in the first video. We know one was somewhere around his lower back, buttocks area, and another person was sitting on his legs. So they were effectively pinning him down to the ground with Chauvin on his neck for nearly 9 minutes. Too bad none of those officers had the intestinal fortitude to not follow the direction of the senior officer on the scene. They're fully grown adults. They have minds of their own. They know the difference between right and wrong, no matter how much time you've been on the job. And they had an affirmative responsibility to stop that murder that was occurring, and they didn't. And so now, they'll all hopefully rot in jail together. So I'm excited about the charges being moved, enhanced, increased, if you will, from third degree for Derek Chauvin to second degree. But, this is just first gear. Jenkins, you got a new book title for me? Why I'm still standing. I had a couple of titles that I went back and forth with, but I started off, black and blue because I'm black and in blue uniform, blah blah blah. But my very first book, Jenkins, was called "The Creation of a Manifesto," and I wrote "The Creation of a Manifesto" on the heels of Christopher Dorner, who had also written a manifesto. Didn't know Christopher Dorner, don't condone the fact that he killed people who had nothing to do with his angst with LAPD, but I understood how he got pushed because LAPD, like Minneapolis PD, like Baltimore PD, like Buffalo PD, right, Carriel? Buffalo PD will push you, will treat you poorly. Baltimore PD treated one of my um, colleagues and friends in the struggle, Joe Crystal, ran him out of Baltimore because he spoke up and spoke out. So, there's a price to pay for officers when you do that. And so many folks say, well, why don't the good ones speak up? Why don't they say anything? And it's because you don't have the support of a lot of times your watch commander or your the police union. Talk about that in a minute. Your captain. You don't want to be out there needing help, having somebody handing you your ass, and backup doesn't come. You don't want to be out there trying to eat, requesting code 7, and have everybody else look the other way when the RTO says negative, handle these 6 calls. So officers, some don't. It just depends on how you're set up, how you're principled, and you know what's important to you. And so when I joined LAPD, it was always important for me to be true to me. And I knew when I joined LAPD that I was a black woman. Nobody had to tap me on my shoulder and remind me like they did Fred Nichols. Talk about him in my book too. Fred Nichols was Christopher Dorner way before Christopher Dorner. And I specifically talk about Fred Nichols in my autobiography because number one, I worked for him. He was a good guy to me. Um, and he was a brother. And now nobody knows Fred Nichols unless I say his name. And so I wanted people to know how LAPD treated Fred Nichols. I get it. He drank the Kool-Aid. He bled blue, something I never, ever did. But I wanted folks to know what happens uh, when you bleed blue. I joined LAPD because I needed a good paying job, period, end of story, full stop. And I was true to me. And, maybe that's why I was only a sergeant. I had Some folks who find me on social media and say, I can understand why you were just a sergeant. Well, I was just a sergeant because I was having a good time being just a sergeant. And I also am of the opinion that as a patrol sergeant, I had way more autonomy and influence over what patrol officers did because when Sergeant Dorsey was working, foolishness didn't occur when Sergeant Dorsey was working. Because you know that Sergeant Dorsey is going to roll up on your calls because that's what a good patrol supervisor does. I'm going to manage your radio call. I'm going to watch, I'm going to oversee, I'm going to evaluate you. And if you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, I'm going to put pen to paper. I had no problem doing that. And thankfully, I had the support of my commanding officer, James Tatro, who I also acknowledge and mention in my book because a lot of subordinates who worked for me, white boys, would go to Captain Tatro and say, "Hey, Sergeant Dorsey is this and this and that," and Captain Tatro would say, "You might want to leave Miss Dorsey alone." He was my biggest supporter. He was a friend. I appreciate him, and I wanted to honor him, a white man, in my autobiography because, but for Captain James Tatro, who went on to become a commander and ultimately lost a battle to cancer, brain cancer, I wouldn't be here talking to you the way that I do, but for um, Commander James Tatro. And so there are good police officers out there of all stripes and persuasions. There are white police officers out there who are there for the right reason, who do the right thing. Just like there are some black and Hispanic and Asian police officers out there who don't do the right thing, who aren't there for the right reason. So I don't broad blanket an entire occupation based on the foolishness of one or two. I often say I can take race out of some of what we see. I think it's police officers who are drunk with power, who have been allowed to continue on to live to offend again when they violate policy and procedures, when they use excessive force and sometimes deadly force. And we've certainly seen examples of officers who do that. Some of the officers that were involved in the murder of Freddie Gray were black. Well, at least one of the officers who stood by when Eric Garner was choked to death was a black female, Adonis, Kizzy Adonis, Sergeant Kizzy Adonis. And so this officer involved in the murder of George Floyd is appears to, based on his name, to be of Asian descent. Thao is his last name. And so these are officers who commit misconduct. Nothing happens. Police department doesn't do anything to deter the bad behavior, and they continue on. So that's why we're here. That's why I think this will continue, and that's why I've asked some of you to reach out to Senator Cory Booker and tell him to holler at me and get with me as he makes this push for legislation to create a national registry. Because I'm not really thinking we need a national registry. We know who these knuckleheads are. Police chiefs have their own local registry. They just don't do anything when they identify them. They ignore the red flags. 18 times Derek Chauvin had been complained against, which brings me to one of their lieutenants, a guy by the name of Bob Kroll. Thanks, Michelle, for sharing that information with me about him. And I did do a little quick research before I came on. Lieutenant Bob Kroll is the president of the Fraternal Order of Police Officers over there in Minnesota, and evidently he's got his ass in a ringer because unions in Minnesota are asking, major unions, it says, are calling for him to step down. He's a lieutenant. Now, he's the president of their Fraternal Order of Police, but if it organized like I think our unions are, while he's a lieutenant working as a union rep, which is nothing more than a lobbying arm of the police department, he is a lieutenant of police, and if he gets kicked out of that position as the president, if he's asked to resign, if there's enough pressure, and so maybe family call to action, pressure from the union members over there, the chief of police has already said that she thinks, and I believe it's a female. Take that back. It's not a female. There's another name. Anyway, they're saying that this Lieutenant Bob Kroll needs to resign and his members need to make that happen. They need to do a punctious pilot on him, so to speak. And this Lieutenant Bob Kroll has said some controversial things. One of the things that he said was, don't rush to judgment in the case of the four officers involved in the murder of George Floyd. Well, wouldn't it have been nice if those officers, particularly Derek Chauvin, hadn't rushed to judgment over Mr. Floyd, he'd still be here. Lieutenant Bob Kroll is also fighting, allegedly, the way it's reported, with the attorneys representing these four officers to help them get their job back. Because I've often said, Fraternal Order of Police presidents, like the Mouth in New York, Pat Lynch, they haven't seen a killing, a murder of a black man or woman that doesn't excite them. And these unions are very, very powerful. Why? Because they make tremendous contributions, monetary contributions, to political campaigns. Maybe that's something you guys can get involved and get engaged in. Come up with some reason, some legislation. Talk to your representatives about what do you do to prohibit politicians from collecting monies from police unions. Because if a politician is collecting money from a police union, you understand why that politician wouldn't want to create any policy changes, any reform that is contradictory to folks like Lieutenant Bob Kroll, who hasn't seen a murder of a black man or woman that he seemingly enjoys. So this Lieutenant Bob Kroll, if they don't run him out, he's up for reelection in 2021 or either 2022. But right now they are calling for his, at least other major unions in Minnesota are calling for his resignation. So anyway, uh, that's that. Now, let's see. What are you guys saying? They failed the entire city just on training alone. Yeah, no, no, Jenkins, we're not taught to put our knees on folks' necks. That's a learned behavior. And then, when you do it once or twice, and then, if you got a supervisor there, I know you guys have seen that video of brother man who's an FBI agent, and they stopped him because they said he had a warrant or something, and they didn't know who he was until the very end when he told them, go in my wallet after they put handcuffs on him and get my ID, and they got his ID, and they're like, oh shoot, FBI, never mind. Well, in that video, you see a sergeant. You see someone with three uh, stripes on their sleeve who was there condoning that foolishness, who was there right along with those officers harassing this brother man because they didn't know who he was. And so, you know, this is how officers are able to linger and stick around, because you have sometimes supervisors who are just as culpable because of either a failure to supervise or because they are, like-minded. Police chief in Mississippi said that the incident involving um, the murder of George Floyd wasn't problematic for him. So if you have the police chief, now I get it's Mississippi, but if you have the police chief saying that, what must his officers think? What must his captains and lieutenants and sergeants think? I don't know. So, anyway, that's that. That's what's going on. That's kind of what I've been doing for the last couple of days. And I just want to share some other news with you because there is other stuff going on. And so while we are thinking about the George Floyd family, there is new news in regards to the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery. But I want us also to keep in mind and do not be distracted. Breonna Taylor was killed by police officers who served a no-knock warrant at her house. And she has kind of got lost in all of this other news that's going on. And so we've not heard a peep about what that investigation looks like, and um, you know, how did they get the no knock? Was there something untoward done? I heard there was a little judge shopping. I don't know if that's true or not, but we need to make sure that the family of Breonna Taylor gets justice as well. And if you guys haven't heard that 911 tape that of her boyfriend when he called, if that doesn't just bring you to tears and break you completely down, I don't know. You've got no heart. And so I heard that for the first time the other day when I was on court TV, and it was all I could do to keep it together to get through that next segment. But it was truly, truly heartbreaking. Not only that this woman lost her life, but to think that young man was there by himself and didn't know what to do. And it was a lot. It was a lot. So let's not lose track of that investigation. So let me tell you what's going on right now, real quick, in the Ahmaud Arbery, because evidently y'all didn't know, but little Roddy, he might have been a damn temptation in his previous life because he is singing, woo wee, he is giving it up. Little Roddy is saying now that I guess he was part of the chase. He was part of the pursuit. He was part of the hunt for young Ahmaud Arbery. And at one point, Ahmaud, according to what William Roddy Bryan is saying, because listen, he's trying to save his ass. He already know them little cheeks. He ain't gonna be able to clamp them tight enough, right? So he's given it up. And he said that when they were chasing him, him too, Ahmaud Arbery was running from side to side. He was trying to get out of this particular neighborhood, and they kind of corralled him and ran him back in the direction of the neighborhood. And at some point, Roddy says he hit him with his car, with his truck. He hit him. And there's evidence, according to something that I read, that says investigators found clothing fibers on William Roddy Bryan's vehicle that led them to know that this was true. He had struck him, and there was a dent, struck Ahmaud Arbery with his car. Can you imagine what that young man must have been thinking as he's running with all of his little might as best he can? He doesn't have a friendly face anywhere within close proximity. He can't call nobody. He's all alone. And these jackasses are chasing him and hunting him down like he's a dog. And then they shoot him. But he doesn't die right away. He's got to be thinking, what the hell? How do I get out of here? What am I going to do? Where do I go? There's a special place in hell for those three. And I hope they keep that corner nice and warm for them. Also, in the Derek Chauvin situation, I guess his wife is filed for divorce. Now, I don't know if she's filing for divorce because she's disgusted by him, or because I would imagine there's tremendous pressure having to live with the fallout. She didn't do anything wrong, but she has to deal with the fallout as well. So maybe she just said, you know what? I was thinking about leaving your punk ass anyway, and so now it's just as good a time as any. So that she's filed for divorce. Okay, let's see. With all that's going on with Chauvin putting his knee on the neck of George Floyd, you would think, but see, if sense were common, everyone would have it. You would think that officers wouldn't even try that little maneuver right now. But there's a female on the San Francisco Police Department who's been caught on cell phone video putting her knee on the neck of a 19-year-old young man by the name of Kahan Busby. And so, Kahan, if y'all know him, make sure he gets a good attorney. The police chief over there, former LAPD command staff officer by the name of Bill Scott, he's the police chief over there. And so he has ordered an administrative investigation. Now, the president of the Police Officers Association, their version of a union in San Francisco, his name is Tony Montoya. And Tony Montoya suggested that the officer really, we didn't see her lean and kneel on the guy's neck, according to their president of their fraternal order of crazy asses. He says that actually what she was trying to do was she was trying to affect code talk, affect an arrest. A department approved restraint was applied to the suspect's upper shoulder blade until the suspect was under control, and then the restraint was released. That's just psychobabble. That's code talk. Yeah, we are taught and trained to place a knee between the shoulder blade, but when you do that, you've already ordered the person to lay down, put their hands in the small of their back, palm up, because you're going to move in very quickly, put cuffs on them, and get off of their shoulder blade, not neck. But that's what the Fraternal Order of Police or Police Officers Association president in San Francisco is saying. And so you see the like-mindedness of these people who head up these unions. They have not as far as I can see. I haven't come across one yet who says, yeah, that was bad. That didn't look good and they shouldn't have done it. I haven't yet seen that. Also, in the midst of this protest, now listen, I talked about this, and so I'll just share this again with you here. There's some police officers out there, and I don't know how many they are, but I heard it, so I know that this happens, that they exist. There's officers who live for protests. They live for what they call stick time, so they can beat some ass and they don't even have to take a name. They just get to beat ass and walk away. And there's a lot of cops that live for that. And you've seen them. You know the ones that are firing rubber bullets and beating people up. And, then they look left and right to see if there's a supervisor and it ain't one. And then they get in a couple of more good licks. There's officers who live for that, just like there are provocateurs who join in and embed with uh, peaceful protesters and wreak havoc. And so there's a couple of officers over in Atlanta, six of them actually, who decided to get in a little taser time. They stopped this young black couple, and the couple said that they got caught up and couldn't get out of the area before the curfew or something. They were out getting something to eat, and as a result of that, these six officers detained the young people, and they wound up pulling them out of the window of their own car after they tased them. So all six officers have been fired for using excessive force, and the mayor over there is not really playing with them. So they're gonna have some splaining to do. And I'll tell you who these six officers are. And the reason I like to give you guys names is because maybe you've dealt with them before. And so now that they've been shown, proven, demonstrated that they are abusive, excessive. If they've done it once, you know they've done it before. You don't just tase somebody and pull them out their car window if you're not used to pulling folks out the car window. So the Fulton County District Attorney has charged these six officers who used the taser gun on these two students. Now, the one young man, his name is Messiah Young, and in all of that, he got a broken wrist. And they did book him that night because, as I say, when they put hands on you, you got to go to jail. They can't just beat your ass and leave you in the street. Well, unless it's in the midst of a protest. But in this instance, these kids were in cars. The cars were in the middle of the street, and probably was a whole bunch of people looking. So they had to do something with the car. So that means they had to arrest them. They couldn't just leave them after they tased them. So these are the six officers involved. If you in Fulton County, Georgia, have been detained, stopped, written a ticket, arrested by any one of these officers, you need to get a good attorney. Ivory Streeter. He's been charged with aggravated assault on Pilgrim. That's I think that might be the female in the car, and pointing or aiming a gun at Young, whoever Young is. Officer Mark Gardner was charged with aggravated assault on Pilgrim for using the taser. Lonnie Hood, aggravated assault on Young for the taser, aggravated assault and simple battery on Pilgrim using a taser. Willie Souls, Officer Willie Souls, charged with aggravated assault, pointed the taser, and criminal damage to this person's car. And then there's Officer Ahmaud Jones, charged with aggravated battery of this young person because this person was forcefully thrown onto an unpaved or onto a paved street. And then this officer, Ahmaud Jones, pointing or aiming a gun at one of the young people. And then no, Officer Roland Cloud, charged with criminal damage to property. Now listen, I'm just reading these names off to you, and I'm just looking at the names, and I don't want to generalize, I don't want to stereotype, but a couple of them sound like they could be, skinfolk, right? Armand Jones, Lonnie Hood, Lonnie, come on, y'all know any white boys named Lonnie? I don't. I ain't never seen one. Which goes to my point. Aggressive, overzealous, drunk with power. I want to get in some stick time. Can be any color. Marie, you said you saw the video and it was heartbreaking. Yeah. Um, yeah. So, yeah. So, yeah, anybody can be abusive and aggressive. So just know that. Over in New Jersey, there's something going on over there. They're going to start. New Jersey will track police use of force, and they're going to require licensing of cops, I think, be stripped. So it says in New Jersey, they're going to launch a statewide database that will keep track of police use of force. Okay, statewide database. They want to keep track. I don't know why they think they need to know. I don't know. They need to see the numbers to prove it's a thing. So they're going to do a statewide database of police use of force, and then they're going to create a licensing system for police officers amid national protests over police violence. The state will also update the police use of force policy for the first time in 20 years. This is in New Jersey. And they're going to create a pilot program for crisis intervention training for New Jersey officers and establish a new team within the state division on civil rights to respond to police shootings and other problems. So they too, like Eric Garcetti, they're going to create this new division, this new team, division on civil rights. And when you create this new team and you identify all these officers that are in the damn database, then what? Then what? Because now that you know who they are, what are you going to do? Somebody shared this story with me, so I'm going to share it with you. Thinking about these officers that have just been arrested, this person remembered a story about a couple of deputy marshals in Louisiana who were charged and convicted in the murder of a young white child, 6 years old. His name was Jeremy Martis. And Jeremy Martis was riding in the car with his dad. There was a police pursuit. It lasted about 2 miles. And then something happened at the end of the pursuit. And these two officers wound up firing, I think, about 18 rounds into the car, and they killed little Jeremy. Now, Jeremy was autistic. The two officers involved, you can Google their names and look at them, but I know for sure Derek Stanford, he's 33 years old. This happened in 2015. Derek Stanford is a brother man, and his partner was Deputy Marshal Greenhouse. Now, Deputy Greenhouse, Marshall Greenhouse is his first name. Deputy Marshall Greenhouse, that's his name, first and last. He didn't go to court. He just pled guilty. He was like, you know what? I'm going to just throw myself on the sword because it's Louisiana. And so, because Marshall Greenhouse pled guilty, part of it meant that he's got to serve at least 2 of the 5 years that he was sentenced without the benefit of parole or probation. And he pled to negligent homicide. Now, Derek Stanford, he rolled the dice. 40 years. He was given 40 years, and that was a manslaughter conviction. 40 years. So don't you guys lose your minds if these four officers get something that isn't even anywhere close to 40 years. Anyway, family, I have held you long enough. Thank you so much for stopping by and hearing what a warrior queen has to say today in my Michael Clark Duncan voice. I was tired, boss. I was tired. So when I get done with you, I'm going to nourish myself. I'm going to treat myself, maybe a little Haagen-Dazs, my other guilty pleasure, and then I'm going to bed. It's been a long day. It's been a full day, and I've got to get up first thing in the morning, 5:45, I think it is. I'm going to be on air with somebody. I think it's a local station here. Let me see. Who am I going to be on the air with at 5:45 in the morning? Yeah, KCAL Channel 9. I'll be on 5:45 for my LA family. So if you guys have an opportunity to check me out, do. And then tomorrow night at 9 p.m., I will be on in Chicago with a news station. And let me just tell you who's who wants to know what Sergeant Dorsey has to say in Chicago. Um, well, let's see if I can pull it up real quick. Not so much. Watch the news in Chicago, 9 o'clock. I don't know if I can figure out what the station is. Um, I'll put it in the comments. And for my Chicago family, because I've been getting a lot of attention out of Chicago as a result of one station that had me on, and And so I had a couple of others, or at least one other, contact me. So I'll be on tomorrow evening, 9 p.m. And I don't even know if that's their time or LA time, 9 p.m. But I'll find out. I'll put it in the comments and let you know. And then 5:45 tomorrow morning, I'll be on with KCAL Channel 9, doing what I do, spreading the truth. Okay. Yeah, no Ed, no hot dogs today. I'm almost hot dogged out, Ed. Almost, not quite. Yeah, no hot dogs. Yeah, no, today I actually got in my own self's kitchen, and so I got some vittles in there that I'm about to go get. But anyway, family, listen, continue to practice safe social distancing. I know businesses are open. When I went over to Portillo's, it was a dining area full of folks, some with masks, some with not without. Of course, I wear two, and I even have a little folded up paper napkin in there as I await a brand new mask that I ordered from China, I think. There's supposed to be an N95. We'll see when it gets here. But anyway, so continue to be safe. And, if you feel like you aren't quite ready to venture out, don't. For those who are, wondering and surmising that maybe this COVID-19 wasn't even a real thing because all these people are protesting and, we haven't heard anything about new spikes. Well, I say to those people, if you don't think COVID-19 is a real thing, go on out. Don't wear a mask. But don't try to shame folks who are wanting to be careful, who want to protect their family members, who don't want to take some mess home to grandma and grandpa. Don't shame them. Continue to do what makes sense for you, family. Do what feels right. Follow your gut. Mine never lets me down. And until next time, family, be good and be safe.